Randy, I'm going to say that this is an area of expertise that I often defer to Jason because I know the work that he's done with the unhoused and the amount of care he's dedicated in times of his life to trying to make sure that they're treated with respect and integrity. But I want to tell you, I read the San Francisco Chronicle article and I read your response to that article. And having had you on the guest on this show, at least on two occasions, I was quite dismayed by the accusations, the allegations, and the way in which they try to portray the work that you do for a segment of the community of this country that literally is disposed of by everyone in a way that is inhumane and frankly basically cruel. And we're dealing with subject matter and people who are largely ill, mentally ill, many of them sick, many of them destitute because of the fate, most of them, if not all of them, destitute because of the phase of capitalism. And yet, because of the political winds that we live in today, the San Francisco Chronicle took the opportunity to do what I consider to be more than just a hit piece. If you can really outline for our audience, can you talk about how the structure of the unhoused and the government in San Francisco using the paradigm of NGOs, nonprofits, and intermediaries as the means of funding caretaking for the unhoused helps create perhaps part of the predicament that was discussed in that San Francisco Chronicle piece? And are there better options?
Thank you, Pascal. I will say for those who haven't read my response to that dishonest Chronicle story, it's at beyondchron.org, beyondchron.org, and it's up there now, and you can read it. And I think one of the things that frustrated me in dealing with reporters, and I spent hours with them to no avail, I tried to put what's going on in San Francisco and other cities into a big context, a broader context of poverty and the lack of affordable housing in America. They kept saying they weren't interested in that. They want to just talk about these very specific things. But when you mention about how do we house low-income people in this country, how do other countries do it? Well, other countries have public housing. The government builds housing, people pay a very low rent, and it works very well. There's also social housing where government builds housing for all income levels, including the poor. Well, when we built public housing in America, a lot of racist mayors didn't really care about quality housing. So, like in Chicago, Mayor Daley said, "Well, build those big high rises because we'll create a lot of construction patronage jobs for me. And I don't care if people living there, I don't care if the black people living there it's not a good place to live. I just want the patronage." And yet then Cabrini Green and other big public housing projects became the symbol of failed liberal government. But the activists, people like me of that time, all said this was going to fail. Same thing happened with, if you see the film, I think it's available on Netflix or Amazon, Pruitt Igloo, when they tore that down in St. Louis. We tore down 100,000 public housing units in 1990 under Bill Clinton. Just think of that. Had a terrible homeless crisis, and we eliminated 100,000 housing units because the conditions were they couldn't be repaired. So starting in homelessness really began in the late 1970s, soon after President Nixon announced that the U.S. was no longer doing public housing. And we've never done it again since. We've eliminated 100,000 units. San Francisco is a rare example of not losing any units, but almost every city used public housing demolition as an excuse to gentrify neighborhood and displace people of color. That's what the whole Clinton Hope program was about outside of San Francisco. So we come to San Francisco, and we've done a lot of very progressive things. And one of the things we did, we had a supply due to people, a number of us who fought to keep SROs from being converted and demolished in the late 70s, early 80s. We had a supply of SRO rooms for homeless single adults. And by leasing the hotels or buying the hotels and having nonprofits run them, we have transformed the lives of thousands of people. It's a national model. And yet
Can you define SROs for our audience?
Yes, single room occupancy hotels. It used to be the word SRO in every newspaper article would be preceded by the word seedy SRO hotels. And as I said in my article, our hotels are all in the better shape than when we acquired them. And yet the media, who wants, just like with public housing, they look for a way to attack something that they don't want to really be there. And the media is never, generally the corporate media, the Hearst Corporation, has never been supportive of preserving as residential hotels. So, you see people say to me about this story written by the Hearst Corporation, like, what's their broader agenda? Why would they attack the most successful program in the nation to house homeless single adults?
Well, I mean, also we should probably add that when San Francisco took over a lot of these old, dilapidated hotels at the time, that were just there, that were built after the earthquake. I mean, these things are over 100 years old. We have to
Yes.
remind people how old they are. Besides them not being in the best shape, a lot of times the city isn't even the owner of the place. They're just renting it on long-term leases.
Right. Well, I think, what's happened is that we took the available supply. Leasing was fine. It's subsidized. And yes, there's an extreme, it's come out with our workers are way underpaid. It's ridiculous because, as Pascal mentioned at the start, when cities contracted out homeless services, they basically didn't have to pay the pension benefits or the salaries of city workers.
Which is why they contracted out, right?
Well, at the time, with both AIDS funding and with homelessness, it was like, well, there's more community concern, cultural competence. Progressives were promoting those values. We were all like, we don't want the city bureaucrats doing it. We want our people. But over time, it really just becomes of a duplicate workforce that gets significantly lower pay and benefits. And that's where we are in San Francisco right now.
One of the things that we evidence in the article is that it basically takes individual examples of rather alleged low quality of life living facilities for unhoused individuals in these facilities as an endemic demonstration of how poor the caliber of life is for people who are using those facilities. And it does that sporadically throughout the article to make it seem like these places are so disheveled, they're horrific, they're rather vile, they're inhumane, they're dirty, and they're filthy. And what I found fascinating in your rebuttal is that you so easily demonstrated that if these places are so filthy, why is it that we have one of the most long-term amounts of maintenance of actually adherence to people wanting to stay in these properties? Can you talk about some of the allegations that they try to level at these facilities and your response to them, please?
And I'd even go beyond that, Pascal, and say that if you look at who are the most politically active residents of the Tenderloin neighborhood, what has made the Tenderloin so politically powerful despite our low income status? It's all SRO residents. You talk to business owners in the neighborhood, they are thrilled with SRO residents because they're the ones cleaning up the streets, working to get parks, getting murals done, supporting the people when they have problems. We build community, but none of that was mentioned in that Chronicle story. They just wanted to focus on people who had grievances about their buildings or were being evicted for not allowing exterminators in. And it really missed the amazing thing that I think we do a lot to build. We have tenant leaders in the building who work with tenants. These folks in these SROs, unlike public housing, which are families, a lot of these single adults do not have a friend in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They're a very lonely group. We do so much to try to break through the loneliness, and it's hard. Some of these folks never leave their rooms. So when they do leave their rooms, our desk clerks say to them, "Hi, how you doing?" We have common lobbies so they can watch sports together and do activities, because the biggest problem in SRO hotels is not drugs, it's loneliness. It's loneliness. And people, most of the tenants in our hotels, the biggest demographic category is 61 to 70. So it's like senior housing. Yet the Chronicle criticized the hotels. They say the program has a lot of deaths. Well, yeah, we have people who are 61 to 70 and they had a life of very hard knocks.
And some of them have been incarcerated.
When you're poor and you're on the street for 10 years, it affects your life expectancy.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out. You can catch the live stream of This Is Revolution every Tuesday through Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time and Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. This is Revolution.